Margaret Chen sat quietly in the hospital corridor, her fingers tracing the edge of her white cane. At 28, she had learned to navigate darkness with grace, but today felt different. Today was the day that might change everything. The pre-surgery waiting area buzzed with muted conversations and the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on polished floors. Margaret wore blue scrubs provided by the hospital, and the blindfold over her eyes was part of the preparation protocol. She had arrived alone, insisting to her father that he didn't need to cancel his morning board meeting. After all, she'd been taking care of herself for years now. But sitting there, listening to families murmur reassurances to one another, she felt the weight of solitude settle on her shoulders like a heavy winter coat. Her father, James Chen, was the CEO of a prominent medical supply company. He had given her everything money could buy: the best specialists, the finest mobility training, a beautiful apartment. What he couldn't give her was time. His absence had become so familiar that Margaret had stopped expecting anything different. She understood, or at least she told herself she did. His work helped thousands of people. How could she ask him to choose her over that? Across the waiting room, Daniel Morrison watched his daughter Emma color in her activity book. At 42, Daniel had been a single father for 3 years now, ever since his wife passed. Emma was 7, bright as a button, and scheduled for a minor procedure to correct a recurring ear problem. Nothing serious, the doctors assured him, but his heart still hammered with worry. Emma looked up at him with those wise eyes children get when they've seen their parents struggle. "Daddy, that lady looks sad." Daniel followed her gaze to the young woman in the wheelchair, sitting apart from everyone else. Something about her posture spoke of resignation rather than fear. "Maybe she's just thinking, sweetheart," Daniel said softly. "But she's all by herself," Emma insisted. "We have each other. She has nobody." The simple observation cut straight to Daniel's heart. His daughter had learned compassion through loss, and it had made her remarkably attuned to others' pain. "You're right," he said quietly. He stood up, uncertain but compelled. "Let's go say hello." They approached slowly, Daniel clearing his throat gently so as not to startle her. "Excuse me, miss, my daughter Emma and I noticed you were sitting alone. We wondered if you might like some company while you wait." Margaret turned her head toward the voice. It was warm, hesitant, kind. That's very thoughtful," she said, surprised. "Yes, I'd like that." Daniel pulled a chair beside her while Emma plopped down on the floor with her coloring book. "I'm Daniel Morrison. This is Emma." "Hi," Emma chimed in. "Are you getting surgery too, Ma?" Daniel said gently. "No, it's fine." Margaret smiled. "Yes, I am. Eye surgery. Actually, there's a chance it might help me see again." "You're blind?" Emma asked with the unfiltered directness of children. "I am," Margaret said, her smile widening. "Have been since I was about your age." "How old are you?" 7.5. "The half is very important." Margaret laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. "Of course it is." They sat together, and somehow conversation flowed easily. Daniel told her about his work as a high school history teacher, about Emma's love of dinosaurs and her impressive rock collection. Margaret shared stories of her work at a non-profit that provided audiobooks to children in underserved communities. She told them about learning to navigate the world through sound and touch, about her guide dog waiting at home, about small victories and everyday frustrations. Time passed differently with them there. The nervousness that had been tightening Margaret's chest began to ease. Emma showed her the textures of her coloring book, guiding Margaret's fingers over the raised outlines. "My daddy reads to me every night," Emma said, "even when he's really tired." "That's because those are the best moments of my day," Daniel said, his voice carrying a tenderness that made Margaret's throat tighten. "Your daughter is lucky," Margaret said quietly. "Not every parent makes that time." Daniel heard something beneath her words, a shadow of old hurt. "Well, I'm lucky too. She's taught me more about what matters than I ever knew before." They called Emma's name first. Daniel stood, suddenly reluctant to leave Margaret alone again. "Will you be okay?" "I'll be fine," Margaret assured him, but her voice wavered slightly. "Tell you what," Daniel said, "when we're done, I'll come back and check on you. If you're still waiting, maybe I can sit with you a bit longer." "You don't have to, I know," Daniel said simply. "But I'd like to." Emma hugged Margaret goodbye, a quick, impulsive embrace that left Margaret blinking back, tears behind her blindfold. 40 minutes later, Danielle returned. Emma's procedure had gone perfectly, and she was resting in recovery with a nurse. He found Margaret still waiting, and he took the seat beside her as if it had been reserved. "How's Emma?" Margaret asked immediately. "Perfect." "Asking for ice cream already." He paused. "How are you?" "Scared," Margaret admitted, surprising her. "It works." "What if it doesn't?" "I've built a whole life around being blind. I know who I am in the darkness." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "When my wife died, someone told me that it's okay to be afraid of both loss and change. They're two sides of the same coin. Either way, you're still you." Margaret felt tears slip beneath the blindfold. "I thought I'd be alone today. I told myself it didn't matter." "It always matters," Daniel said gently. "Being alone when we're afraid, that's one of the hardest things." They called her name. Danielle stood with her, and on impulse, Margaret reached out. He took her hand, steady and warm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." "Thank you for letting us sit with you," he replied. "You gave Emma something today. You showed her that kindness is always the right choice." 6 weeks later, Margaret stood in the park, blinking in the autumn sunlight. The surgery had been a remarkable success. Colors were still overwhelming, and she was learning to process the visual world all over again. But she could see. She'd asked Daniel to meet her here, at this bench by the pond. When he and Emma arrived, Margaret saw them for the first time via Daniel's kind eyes that matched his gentle voice, Emma's bright smile and her purple dinosaur t-shirt. "You can see us," Emma squealed, running up to hug her. "I can," Margaret said, laughing and crying at once. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." Over coffee, while Emma fed the ducks, Margaret and Daniel talked for hours. She told him about calling her father, about finally saying what she'd needed to say, that success wasn't just about achievements, but about being present. Her father had cried, apologized, and promised to do better. She told Daniel she'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, and that sometimes strangers become the people who change everything. Daniel listened, and when she finished, he said, "Emma asked me the other day why I went over to you that morning. I told her I didn't really know, that I just felt pulled to. But I think I understand now. We all need someone to sit beside us in the waiting room sometimes. That's all. Just to sit beside us and remind us we're not alone." Margaret looked at this man who'd shown her daughter and her such simple, profound kindness. "Would you like to have dinner sometime? All three of us?" Danielle smiled. "We love that." As they walked together through the park, Emma between them, Margaret realized something. She'd spent so long afraid of needing people, of being a burden. But maybe that was the greatest side of Walla, seeing that connection wasn't weakness, and that the best moments in life often came from the smallest acts of compassion. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest thing we can do is simply let someone sit beside us in our darkness. And sometimes, that's exactly when the light finds its way in.